I went out with a cutter to meet two refugee boats, one of which was reported to be in difficulties. The refugees waiting to leave are terrified that Castro might close the door at any moment, and they're prepared to take almost suicidal risks to get away.
I'm escorting one of the many boats that have come out of Cuba in the last few days since Castro decided to let people who wanted to come to America go.
A lone motorboat plows its way through the unpredictable seas of the Straits of Florida, carrying its human cargo of refugees on the last stretch of a 10-hour journey from communist domination to freedom. Ahead of them, the American coastline and the port of Key West. On the quayside, groups of Cuban exiles wait and watch, hoping against hope that this boat, or perhaps the next, will be carrying members of their family, loved ones who, until 10 days ago, it seemed unlikely they would ever see again. The watch is kept round the clock, with families taking it in turns.
Who are you waiting for today?
I'm waiting for my father and just about most of my family, about 13 persons.
How long is it since you've seen them?
5 years.
And how long have you, how did you get out of Cuba?
Well, I escaped out in a boat. I sneaked out of Cuba in a boat.
And you know they're definitely coming today?
Well, it should, because they've been up there for about 4 days. And I was talking to Captain Tornies, and he got out of there the day before yesterday at 11 o'clock at night. And he said that he saw them out there and they were planning on getting out next morning. But I figured that bad weather would have stopped them from coming. But they should be here anytime now.
You excited about it?
Well, I'm sure I am, I'll tell you the truth.
Are you surprised that Castro has been this lenient?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, it's something can't be explained, you know.
Why do you think he's done it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, the thing is this, if you're in a house with 10 people and you got them locked up and you know that 7 of them people are against you, why should you be feeding them, you know, and give them clothes? Why don't you open the doors and let them get out, and the clothes and the food you're going to spend on them, you know, you're saving for the other 3 you got that like you.
Between Key West and Camarioca, the departure port in Cuba, lie 90 miles of turbulent seas, often storm-swept, always dangerous. Key West is a popular deep-sea fishing resort for American sportsmen. Since Castro lifted his ban, the charter boat owners have been inundated with requests from Cuban exiles to sail across to Camarioca. But the U.S. Coast Guard has warned owners that at present the trip is illegal. No American citizen is allowed to go to Cuba without express permission. Nevertheless, boats do sneak out, and in the Coast Guard station operations room, a log is kept showing estimated times of arrival of boats on their way back, so that they can be intercepted by the Coast Guard cutters. But until the journey is legalized, most boat owners won't take the risk, even though the rewards are high.
My boat is 36 feet. It probably would hold 40 on the trip, and I was offered $50 a piece. So it was very tempting, as a matter of fact.
$50 a head per person coming out of
Right.
Cuba?
This would have meant approximately $2,000 for one day's trip.
Why did you turn it down in that case?
Well, because I checked with the Customs Department here, and the United States government is frowning on it. And also, there were some boats who went over, and when they came back, they were impounded. And frankly, I have too big an investment in my boat. And
It just wasn't worth the risk, you feel?
I didn't think so,
Even
no.
for that sort of money?
Even for that kind of money, because I just spent a lot of money fixing it, and I want to use it. And frankly, I don't think it's a good idea to go against the United States government.
The skipper of Greyhound 3 did defy the authorities, and now his boat is impounded indefinitely. Big ships capable of carrying thousands of refugees safely wait for America and Cuba to agree on an exodus plan. Meanwhile, the difficult task of shepherding the small boats over falls to Coast Guard cutters. Their young crews have already saved scores of lives, snatching people aboard as their boats sank under them. I went out with a cutter to meet two refugee boats, one of which was reported to be in difficulties. Unconfirmed reports have said that the nuclear submarines we passed on our mission of mercy have been keeping an eye on the exodus from Camarioca from periscope depth. Navy gunboats have been prowling the Florida Straits too, although officially the Navy has not yet been asked to help in the evacuation. But while the governments argue over conditions, the men on the spot are worried that sooner or later there'll be a tragedy, and every available method is being used to prevent that happening. Across the straits at the little port of Camarioca, the number of small boats, most of them unfit for the crossing, increases hourly. The refugees waiting to leave are terrified that Castro might close the door at any moment, and they're prepared to take almost suicidal risks to get away. But their fears seem unfounded. They're given good free meals by the Cuban authorities while they wait their turn, and everything at Camarioca seems to suggest that the Cuban government is doing all it can to speed up their departure, and until they leave, make the waiting time as comfortable as possible. They're organized into neat queues for documentation. Each refugee is issued with a new passport, and then they wait to be called for in family groups. No one of military service age, from 15 to 28, is allowed to leave. It's unlikely this baby's meal will stay down for long. But the fear of being seasick and spending a miserable 10 hours being tossed about like a cork is no deterrent to these people, looking forward to a lifetime ahead away from the controls and fears of a communist state. With their luggage aboard, each family is allowed one suitcase, another group sets off. The weather forecast is bad, driving rain and winds gusting up to 40 miles an hour. But even if a hurricane were on its way, it wouldn't stop this slender craft setting out on its voyage to freedom. Across the straits, our Coast Guard cutter has spotted the two boats we set out to meet. The bigger of the two boats, packed with refugees, seems all right, but the other one was in danger of sinking, and her cargo of refugees has been taken off by another Coast Guard vessel. Aircraft keep an eye on the maneuvers over the rendezvous point as our cutter takes the limping boat in tow and turns towards Key West. These boats were lucky. The rendezvous could be made in daylight with only moderate seas running. One of the motorboats we are to escort into harbour made the run to Cuba 2 nights earlier, dodging the searchlights of the Coast Guard cutters as she crept out of Key West. The skipper will have been paid over $1,000, about £300, to carry this load, but will face charges when he arrives in Key West.
I'm riding back through a very choppy Straits of Florida tonight, escorting one of the many boats that have come out of Cuba in the last few days since Castro decided to let people who wanted to come to America go. Boats have been coming into Key West in Florida, which is now appearing on the horizon over there, for several days. But the armada, which was expected, the armada of little boats, which was forecast to be like another Dunkirk, just hasn't happened yet. No one quite knows why. It could be because Castro has not got the boats at the other end, and at the moment the American authorities here won't let people in Key West take their boats across to Cuba. It's still an offense. Until this is sorted out and the American authorities have worked out some definite system for getting these people, this is how it's going to come. They're going to come across in a very, very dangerous way. Now these people are on the last 3 or 4 miles of their 90-mile journey from Cuba to Key West, Florida.
Off Key West, with dusk rapidly setting in, the sailing boat, which had left Camarioca over 12 hours before, plows towards the harbour. She's been escorted for the last 30 miles by a large Coast Guard vessel, but didn't need any help. The crew of the Coast Guard boat will have a quick hot meal and set off again to take up their station for the next leg of the relay race.
Let's go with it.
Not too much slacking. Hey, what do you mean come down so we can ship too?
The end of the voyage to freedom for the passengers on the sailing boat as she pulls into the Coast Guard jetty. She's been buffeted by high winds, pounded by rising seas, and most of the people on board have been very, very ill. But she's got there, vanguard of many more brave little vessels that will follow. It's too dark now for relatives to recognize each other, but they wave anyway, hoping that this is the boat which will reunite them with members of their family.
Somebody make a hole for these people to get through there. Watch out.
Follow that woman around with the baby. Hold it there, son.
Come on, Pete.
That's it.
This way,
Follow with this one with the baby.
But there can be no happy reunions yet. The weary refugees are led off to the Coast Guard buildings for the lengthy process of vetting by US immigration officials. Some will have relatives to claim them, but others will be starting a new life in a strange country on their own, without being able to speak a word of English. To take care of them until they can find their own feet, various church and charity organizations have set up care centers in Miami. But meanwhile, they have to just sit and wait as photographers scramble round, stunned by the rigors of the trip and the thought that they've finally made it.
Can we ask that lady to turn the baby around? Try to get the baby around. That's it. The little boy. How many we got on there? Get her a little girl, too. These two people right here.
Dawn the next day, and the last leg of the journey, a ride by bus along the 140 miles of causeway linking Key West to Miami, a ride into the sunshine and a new life ahead.